So without further ado, I'd like to reintroduce Tista, who's got a great session lined up around supporting you to thrive in the NHS. Tista.
Thank you, Raj. Welcome, everyone. Hello. So as you know, I am Tista, and I'm really pleased to be with you now to explore, welcome to UK practice and how you can thrive in the NHS. I suppose the first thing to say is if you are thinking of joining UK practice, or have recently joined, then a very massive welcome to you. It's hugely important that you, as we were talking before at the round table, it's hugely important that you have a smooth experience, and we are utterly grateful. We are very reliant in the NHS in the UK on colleagues who qualified internationally. Over 30,000 actually qualified in India. So we're always very grateful to you and always very welcoming of you. So the plan for the rest of the session really is to explore some of the challenges as well as the opportunities, and provide a little bit of a taster session around that induction that I spoke about earlier. But before I do that, I introduced myself very briefly earlier, so just a little bit more thoroughly, I'll give you a little bit of background. So, as I said, I've been in healthcare for a while now, 25 years, and that work is predominantly with survivors of abuse. And over the years, I became really interested in how, when systems don't work well together, those survivors can be impacted very negatively. And of course, that applies much more broadly to patients, to service users, but also the professions. So when 10 years or so ago, a colleague and I were asked to set up a support service for colleagues on the ground by the GMC, I was really excited by that opportunity, like being at the vanguard of things. And as I say, it's really important to ensure that that support is there. And it's not something that I'd ever seen a regulator do. But then when I started having set up the service initially and scoping things with people, it became really clear that we were thought of predominantly in fitness to practice terms, because one of the very first conferences that I spoke at, I was introduced on the conference podium to the theme of the Imperial March, Darth Vader's theme tune, for those that don't know. And the conference organisers, whilst they were joking, it was really clear that they were making that point that you are seen as being that ivory tower regulator. We are really fearful of you. And it was that moment that crystallised for me what fear we're beheld in, that level of fear, but also what we needed to do. And as I learned more about the GMC and all our work, it became really clear to me that yes, we are thought of predominantly in fitness to practice terms. I understand why, because it's about livelihoods. It's not just a job being a doctor, is it? But of all our functions that you can see here on this slide, standards, that's the absolute fulcrum of what we do. And it informs everything else, whether we are talking registration, whether we are talking undergrad or postgrad education, and indeed fitness to practice. And I would argue that actually supporting colleagues on the ground to deliver the standards, and I'll come more to that in a few moments, that is in many ways more important for patient safety than work on fitness to practice, because the work on fitness to practice, the really serious stuff, serious issues that we see around fitness to practice apply to such a tiny minority. It's actually 0.025% of the register each year where we see such serious issues that doctors are removed from the register, and therefore logically, but most importantly morally, the more that we can do to support colleagues on the ground to deliver complex standards, whether we're talking end-of-life care, whether we are talking safeguarding, whether we're talking raising concerns, it's difficult. So the more that we can do to support colleagues to do that, well, that's the right thing for a regulator to do, and supports you as well as your patients far more. So that's kind of the philosophy behind a lot of our work at the GMC. And as I say, all of this links to that support service that a colleague and I set up a number of years ago, and that is now GMC Outreach. And I'll let you digest that. This is what we do essentially. So, as it says there, we are there. We're regionally based and nationally based. So wherever you work in the UK, you have got a point of contact. And yes, as it says, we are there on the ground offering consultancy and teaching. But what I think is really, really important is that we are also there to hear what's happening. So if you tell me that one of my team that actually last weekend, I'm a foundation year 2 doctor, and last weekend I had 47 outliers in T&O, in trauma and orthopedics, and this is a recurrent issue. I've raised this before, but nothing's changing. Well, then we can provide support. So we provide the teaching, but also the support on the ground as well to ensure that those standards are embedded. And, there we are, working with students there and working here with internationally qualified colleagues. And much of our work is rooted in our standards, and as I say, I'll come back to that in detail in a few moments. But first of all, over to you, really, and please do just throw any thoughts you've got into the Slido if you're joining on the platform. So what concerns do you have about starting UK practice? So if you're in the platform, you can go onto a tab, and we're launching a poll for you there. So I'm just going to flick screens to see if I can see what you're typing in. Right. So, can we launch that first question, please, on what concerns people have about starting UK practice? Oh, has it? Okay, brilliant. I can't see it on my screen for some reason. I wonder if there's a delay at my end. Okay. Okay. Right, for whatever reason, I can't actually see questions or comments? Right, okay. All right, so yeah, so culture, absolutely, and yes, we know that there are huge challenges with PLAB at the moment. Okay, so I'm just going to okay, brilliant. All right, yeah, communication, yes, that is something that comes up a lot of the time. All right, so I'm not surprised to see any of that. And Scott, thank you for relaying those back to me. I'm not sure what's happening technologically, but that's really helpful. So you're absolutely right. These are the kinds of things that we hear about. PLAB is a more recent one because of the challenges in the system now. And if you go on our website, there's information around dates that we're putting on and how we're balancing ensuring safety given the pandemic and being able to get people through PLAB. But in terms of starting practice, culture, communication quirks, these are the things that come up all the time. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you now, it's a list that I'm going to share. And as I do this, can you just type in again into Slido what you think this list represents? Okay, and finally, so any thoughts on what you think that might be?
So some of the answers that have been coming in are NHS trust start orientation.
Yeah, absolutely. And
like, so people are saying things like induction program.
Yeah. And you're right. This is a real list. It is the real list that my friend had in terms of her induction. So she qualified in Sudan, and 2 weeks later, this was her induction, and 2 weeks later, she was there thrown onto the wards. So, you know, where is the welcome and thank you for coming to the UK? Where is these are the patient expectations here. This is how, this is what the wider ethical framework and the legal framework, the medico-legal framework, that's how that works here. Where is the culture shock, the communication quirks, as someone commented earlier? Where is all of that? Where's the support? It's really, really concerning that colleagues are being given this as an induction. Yes, these things are important, but all of that wider stuff, that is absolutely necessary. And I'm just going to share some quotes with you from international colleagues who we ran focus groups with. And this penultimate point, these are all poignant, but this penultimate one, I'm just going to give you a bit more detail around that. So this doctor, in his country of qualification, there's one type of catheter, unisex catheter. Here we have male and female catheters. How was he to know? It wasn't part of his induction. He again was thrown onto the wards without a great deal of supervision, and when he was, as it says here, asked to go and get the catheter from the cupboard, he was working on a male ward. The cupboard had both male and female catheters. So that was a catastrophe that was eminently preventable through proper induction. And you know, the doctor in question, it has since been supported, but it is absolutely disgraceful that that support wasn't provided earlier. Now, some places do it really, really well, but we need consistency around this. And some of our research shows the kinds of things that's needed, and it won't surprise you. It's that sort of the practical stuff around visas, living arrangements, but networks, the cultural differences that you've mentioned in the chat, some differences in clinical skills, but it predominantly tends to be the culture and language, as in communication quirks rather than English language ability. So it's these areas that really, really need focus. There are other challenges in UK practice as well, and those are around, for example, discrimination and around well-being more broadly. And we were talking earlier this morning about these issues, and well-being, for example, workload is something that really, really impacts on that. So there are challenges, but there's a lot of work going on to address these. And I remember a number of years ago now, our former chair said that the best way to keep patients safe, well, he often used to say this actually, is to keep doctors safe. And that is very much our philosophy. And there's a huge programme of work, whether it is around well-being, whether it is around fairness, that discrimination piece, reflection, supporting colleagues around raising concerns. There's a lot of work going on, and it's ensuring that you've got access to that. So I just want to talk through some of that support now, so that you have got that available to you and have awareness of it to help you thrive in the NHS. So there are networks, whether we are talking diaspora networks, whether we are talking networks for international colleagues. So the Head Start project is one example where international colleagues started here, IMG started here and thought, hang on a minute, we need more for IMGs. So they set up this great project, and they run webinars and all sorts. So there's resources available that way, but there are also formal resources. I was speaking to a colleague very recently, just this week, who had cause to raise a concern. And she was really worried about speaking up, and she was really worried about detriment to her career. And she really valued our conversation because she hadn't been made aware of resources like freedom to speak up at the organisation that she worked at. And she's since linked in with the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, who has been able to give her really, really good support. So there are some resources that we really need to be primed of from the start, just in case you do need to use them. So when you find yourself, if you find yourself in that situation, it's not a sudden scramble, or you don't feel like you're alone, because these are resources that often colleagues, wherever you qualify, are going to need to access just from a pastoral basis. And there's loads from the NHS directly as well, wellbeing support resources, etc., and us. So I'll come to talking about our standards and the courses that we have around that in a moment, but there's a lot more. That there are learning materials, case studies, CPD, sort of self-assessments and things that you can do as well. There's a huge amount by way of support. Our ethical hub, for one, it is something that is used very widely. So please do access those. But just to move now onto our standards and speak about that a little bit more. So when I talk about our standards, going back to that jigsaw slide where standards was in the centre, I'm referring to good medical practice. So our ethical guidance. And when I say good medical practice, it isn't just the central document there that I'm referring to, but also everything that flows from it. Okay, so that might be decision making and consent. That might be child protection, confidentiality, etc. Sometimes we hear, and even in undergrad here in the UK, I have heard tutors say, this is really good, but a lot of it's common sense. Colleagues, it's not common sense in a lot of cases. This next slide, which is horrible, I don't expect you to try and read it, that's the point. This is a list of all the pieces of legislation that we distilled to put into just one piece of guidance, in this case, confidentiality. And that means that, well, there are 47 pieces of legislation here. So that means that doctors either need to know all 47 pieces of legislation, or at least the relevant bits, or you need to have a familiarity with our confidentiality standards, because what our policy teams do, they look at the wider medical ethical framework, and then they look at the salient bits of law and they put it into a more digestible document for you. And that means that the standards are not merely common sense or just best practice, but they are the benchmark. They're the benchmark for practice. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to know it all verbatim, but you need to know the themes covered therein so that you think, OK, I've got a challenging confidentiality scenario coming up. I know these are covered in the standards, so I know I need to pick it up and just have a look to help give me a safety net, moving to the next image, for my decision making. And that's your safety net, and it's your patient's safety net as well. So that's what we want the standards to be. Yes, they're a benchmark, but we want them to support you. So we want them to be your safety net. And we also want them to be a lever for change. So when you are, I don't know, working in a ward, and I'm thinking a stroke ward that I was working with for a little while, they were telling me that they weren't able to apply our standards around DNA CPR. However, because we were working with them, and of course they had familiarity with our standards because we were there teaching them, they were able to use those standards as a lever to make changes. So they had time and the infrastructure to be able to have the appropriate DNA CPR conversations that are needed, that the system wasn't allowing them to do. So the standards, in addition to being the required benchmark, in addition to being your safety net, are also a lever for change that you can use in that positive way to help ensure and nudge the cultural environments that we need to be able to deliver the standards for our patients. So that's how I'd like everyone to view the standards. And if you are coming to UK practice or have recently come to UK practice, a really good way of getting that grounding is by joining our free course. Welcome to UK practice. It's a free half-day workshop. And it covers everything from the culture shock that we've touched on to the support available, but most comprehensively, out of all of the areas that we cover in that course, we really delve into a number of areas of GMC standards and guidance. There are also other resources that I've touched on, such as self-assessment tools and things like that. But the course is, I would say, absolutely fundamental to starting practice here. And no need to use the poll, given that I'm having a few tech challenges here. But question for you, just have a think. Do you think it works, this course? It really does. So 97% felt it improved their knowledge, but I'm just going to highlight this one. 91% would actually change their practice as a result of attending. And importantly, we've got academically robust evaluation as well. And that shows that not only do people say that, yes, they intend to change their practice, but at follow-up, people have changed their practice. And that's highly unusual, actually, for a one-off medical educational intervention. So it really, really makes a difference. And at the moment, given that this is a half-day workshop and we feel that employers have a responsibility to provide much more support, actually, than just allowing their new colleagues to attend a half-day workshop, we're working with NHS England, with their Medical Workforce Rate Equality Standards team, to further influence induction and develop something that's more comprehensive. And we are hopeful that NHS more broadly will roll that out, so every employer gives that comprehensive induction, which Welcome to UK Practice is a part of, but it's not the totality of. But that's a watch this space thing. In the meantime, you know that you've got Welcome to UK Practice available to you. So I'm going to provide a little bit of a taster now, and it would and one of the scenarios that we use, just by way of example, is where we look at what you might do in certain examples. You know, if a patient is giving you a gift, for example, would you always, sometimes, never accept it? But the example that I want to use right now, so your girlfriend, Elora, needs her prescription filling. So she is she has asthma and she's due to fly to Frankfurt tomorrow evening. And she's not had time to go to her GP, so she's not had time to get her script filled. So she asks you, can you please fill my prescription just on this occasion, because I've not had time? So can we launch the relevant poll around that and see what you think? Do you think you can always, sometimes, or never fill Elora's prescription in these circumstances? And I'll see if my tech woes are over and I can actually see your answers. And if not, dear, it'd be great if you could let me know what people are typing in.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just waiting, we'll give it a couple of seconds just
yeah,
to get a few answers rolling in. So we've got an update. So 100% of the answers currently are in the never option.
Okay. Interesting. So let me bring my slides back up. So in these specific circumstances, you're absolutely right. These specific circumstances, no, you wouldn't prescribe. So so that's brilliant. Now, there are some there are some nuances, I suppose. Now, there could be some assumptions that we might make. There could be a reason where Elara absolutely can't access out of hours GP, pharmacist. So for example, if it wasn't the following evening, but actually she's leaving in a couple of hours, then that might be different. But in these specific circumstances, no, I wouldn't. Now, what the standards actually say is wherever possible, you must not prescribe for, you know, those close to you, friends, family, those close to you. And it's a wherever possible because occasionally there will be those circumstances where it is the right thing to do. But one of the things that I've always found useful about those standards is that sometimes there can be an expectation from friends and family because it can be routine in some countries to prescribe for friends and family. There's a real expectation to continue doing that when you start UK practice. And that's where I find things like the standards really useful to be able to say, I'm really sorry, Mum, actually, I can't. Things like that. But it's great that you're aware of that. So moving on, I want to share a complex case with you. And I mentioned earlier that that I work in sexual assault referral centres, and whilst I've changed the scenario slightly, the details I'm sharing with you is Talia's case, and she is essentially a composite of many of the patients that we see in these scenarios. So, as it says here, she was diagnosed with HIV 2 years ago, but lost to follow-up. Now she's just re-engaged with sexual health, so she's just re-engaged with GUM services. Her partner is unaware of her HIV diagnosis. And you see that she's actually got a history of violence from her partner. And to be clear, it's the same partner. So you're building a really good rapport with her. And as you try and explore things with her, she makes it clear that she doesn't want to go to the police regarding the abuse. She acknowledges that she is still suffering domestic abuse, domestic violence from her partner, but she doesn't want to explore support. She doesn't want her GP to know about her HIV status because you see that it's blocked off in her records. And she doesn't want her partner to know about her HIV diagnosis. And when you explain that you can undertake anonymous partner notification, she says, well, no, he'll work it out. I absolutely do not want you to breach my confidentiality. So we'll bring Talia back as a whole person in a few moments, but I just want to look at each question individually first. So if we can launch the relevant poll, please. So she's a competent adult. Do we have to disclose information about domestic violence? And I think if I go into the Slido directly, I'll be able to see the answers. I can't on the platform, but
if you want to, so I can just wait for them to come through in a little bit and then give you some updates, and then if it changes in a little while, I'll let you know as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you.
I think just giving everyone a minute to answer, and I think it takes a couple of seconds to sort of refresh and reflect onto the platform.
Okay. So, any thoughts? And focus on the question. Do we have to disclose?
So currently 100% of the answers lie on yes to social care, and 0% think to police, and 0% think no.
Thank you. Interesting. So the answer, if you will, and I'll explain this all, I'll break it down properly, but the answer is no, you don't have to. Okay. So, moving on to the next question. Do you have to disclose her HIV status to her GP? Now, of course, we know that there are contraindications that a GP needs to be aware of in order to treat her properly, and for continuity of care, it's important. But she is worried. So when it comes to the bottom line, whilst you're going to provide her with reassurance that her GP has the same duty of confidentiality, you're going to try and, counsel her to ensure that she does let her GP know. Do you have to? So if we can launch the relevant question, if we haven't already, and see if see what our answers are.
So the question has been launched. So again, guys, just keep continuing to answer. So for now, 100% of the responses lie with no.
Okay. And you would be absolutely right. You don't have to. So just unpicking that one a little bit more. There are challenges, of course, as I just mentioned. So you would try and find a solution, and that solution could be that if she really feels, if she doesn't have the confidence in her GP that he or she is going to maintain a confidentiality, then you could suggest changing GP, because it really is important, of course, that a GP is aware. However, the bottom line is that you can't breach confidentiality, but in most circumstances like this, we are able to reassure the patient or find another solution for them. Okay, so the final element then, just to bring that up, if we can launch this question. So again, of course, you've counselled Talia that her partner needs to know, but she won't tell him about her HIV. She is terrified. You can see that she is absolutely terrified. What's your obligation now? Do you have to breach a confidentiality and arrange partner notification?
So right now, 100% of the answers lie with yes.
Interesting. Okay. So the answer, looking at the language of the question, must you arrange partner notification? The answer is actually no. So let me explore that with you. When we're looking at disclosing information, confidentiality, there are three things that we need to consider, and the standards, I've taken the key points out of the standards and guidance and put this into a little bit of an algorithm for you, and a lawyer colleague came up with this as a mnemonic clap, which is frankly slightly hilarious when you're talking about sexual health, but we'll go with it. First consideration: have you got consent? In this case, we've not got Talia's consent. Of course, you would explore and provide her with reassurance, but if you've not got consent, that is clearly out of the question. So the next consideration is there a legal requirement Does the law compel you to share information? And in this instance, so whether we're talking about the domestic abuse, where a number of you thought social services would need to have the information shared with them, or whether we're talking this disclosing partner notification wise, there is no law in statute that says you must share information in these circumstances. There are laws that are relevant, for example, reckless transmission, but that's not a law that applies to you as the doctor to share the information. So that brings your decision down to the public interest test. So as a doctor, you've gone through, okay, I've got a really difficult confidentiality scenario here. I've not got the patient's consent. There isn't a law that prescribes me to share the information. So that means I have to use the public interest test and exercise my professional judgment. And the public interest test is where you balance the benefits to an individual or society versus the harm to the patient, first of all. And that balance, you know, in this scenario, we can see that there might be harm to Talia. That's the harm to Talia there. But we can see that there are benefits to her partner, or indeed wider society, because he may be sleeping around, she may be sleeping around. So based on that, what do we put more weight on? Well, there's one other thing to consider in the public interest test. And that is the public interest test in having a confidential medical service. So, for example, if your sexual health clinic, if your small GP practice, if my sexual assault referral centre gets a reputation for being leaky with confidential information and patients stop presenting, then that is a wider public confidence issue, that public interest in having a confidential medical service. So those are all the things you need to weigh before you make a decision. And that doesn't necessarily, certainly in this scenario, make it suddenly, oh yes, I know what to do. It doesn't suddenly make it clear, but it gives you an idea of the complexity of all of the factors you need to consider. And with anything like this, you can put in all of those factors into, you can balance them all. So every factor can make a difference. Now, Talia, right now, you're building a good rapport with her. You might think that, hang on, we're getting a good relationship. She has represented. So I think that in the next couple of months, I can get her somewhere safe from a safeguarding point of view, and then undertake partner notification. It could be that Talia has children in the home. That changes the balance of the scales completely, doesn't it? It could be, it won't be in this case because she's only just re-engaged, but it could be that she has a zero viral load. Changes the scenario completely. It could be that she got HIV from her partner. You know, there are all kinds of considerations that change the balance, and that's why with things like this, there aren't any definitives. It's down to your professional judgment, but it's not easy. So we also say in the standards, take advice. There are 24-hour medical defence organisation helplines. We've got an ethics helpline that you can write into as well. And experienced colleagues, always get a sense check, because in a scenario like this, I know where my biases are, but I appreciate there's no room for my biases. So that's what Welcome to UK Practice. That's what sessions from our outreach advisors do. I'm not going to read through the next paragraph with you, but it's a complex paragraph, and we break that down for you and show you how to interpret our guidance. So this is about the public interest test. So that's it really, and I want to leave you with a final thought as we start to hit the 45-minute mark. So what we asked patients and public, what makes a good doctor? So can you just type in, please, if we launch the next poll, what one word do you think was most commonly said as what makes a good doctor? And hopefully we will start to generate a word cloud in a few moments. Any thoughts? Okay, I can see some words coming in. We've got compassionate, so I can see it now, dear.
Okay, great.
Yeah, compassionate, advocate, professional, problem solver. And there we have it. Someone's put in listener and caring. The most popular word, and we spoke with hundreds of patients, was listens. Okay. And everything that you've said about being professional, about being an advocate, you know, you can see that those are here as well. But the most important thing was listens. So final couple of things to say then. I hope that's given you an overview of how complex some of the standards can be and how it was only a very quick taster today. Of course, if we were doing the workshop, we would have an opportunity to really discuss these things in the room and address questions. So that's what our workshop does. It looks at those complex areas for you. I hope today has also given you an overview of some of the support resources available. And I'm sharing with you as well, and this link will be made available, the slides will be made available, a beautiful video that a number of IMGs, International Medical Graduates, did for us on things that they wish that they had known when they started UK practice. So please do access that. It's a short video, just under 10 minutes, with some tips from them. And that's shown in our course too. But then finally, please do have those things in mind. My biggest takeaway, of course, is, as you might imagine, please do go to our website and sign up to Welcome to UK Practice, and we can talk more thoroughly about all of the areas there. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you in person or virtually at a Welcome to UK Practice sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Tista. As always, you've given us such a valuable presentation, and I hope that everyone learned something from this. I know I sure have, and it was extremely useful. So thank you so much.
Very welcome.